Welcome to the Ignorance is Strength podcast. I'm your host, Fabian motherfucking Ojeda, and I don't know shit, but that's okay. All right, let's get this shit started. Thank you, everybody, for listening to the Ignorance is Strength podcast. Hope you all enjoyed episode number 104. Definitely a short but deep kind of chat there. A little, interesting. We kind of a break from all the ha-ha bullshit we usually have going on. But, I wanted to lighten things up again. And I'm excited to talk to today's guest. I want to welcome to the podcast for the first time, Mr. Hollywood, Wade Williamson. How you doing, man?
How you doing, my friend? I'm glad to be here.
Hey, so I know you're not in Hollywood. Where's the Hollywood nickname come from?
Okay, so that's an interesting story. When I was coming up back in the VHS tape days, I had a friend of mine's mom who worked at a local video store that we had, and she would get the movies basically for free because she worked there, and she would bring them home. Well, I would take them and record them, like dub them, basically. Wow. Kind of the early age of piracy, I guess you could say. And one of the video stores that was big in our market was called Hollywood Video.
Yeah, we had those.
All right, so one day at school, it was like on a Friday, a bunch of my friends was going to get together, try to figure out what we were going to do the weekend. And somebody was like, well, man, we can go to Hollywood Video, rent some movies. And they was like, why are we going to do that? They's like, Wade's got every movie we want. He's like, we got Hollywood Wade here. And that just kind of stuck, and I've used it ever since.
Nice. Yeah.
So it's really got nothing to do with the actual city of Hollywood, but just that Hollywood Video store.
I don't know, man. I thought Hollywood Video was, I thought it was a little better than Blockbuster. I enjoyed it more than Blockbuster anyway.
Yeah, I did too. They were right across the street from each other in my hometown where I grew up. And I always preferred Hollywood Video. Now, Blockbuster outlasted them, at least in my area. And it eventually went down too, everything pretty much did when Netflix come along.
Yeah, so Mr. Hollywood Wade, where are you joining us from today?
I'm actually in Charleston, South Carolina.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so completely different from LA over here, right?
Yeah, I'm probably about as further away as you can get.
Cool, man. But that's the part of the podcast I enjoy. I really like talking to people from different parts of the US or different parts of the world even. So when the hell else would we have an opportunity to to talk?
Exactly. You wouldn't. So this kind of thing just brings people together and lets people share their stories and, their accomplishments. And one thing I've learned since doing this, and I'm sure you have as well, there's a lot of great stories out there that people would like to hear and like to know. I mean, some funny, some sad, some, all kind of different emotions tied up in it. Yeah.
And that's just kind of what I was mentioning right here in the little buildup is that, we usually do some funny ha-ha shit, but then sometimes it gets deep, man. It gets pretty intense there. But I was looking through your podcast page. I will introduce that, the Crime and Entertainment podcast, right?
Yes, sir. Crime and Entertainment.
And I was like, man, you talk about stories. There's some stories there. I'm like, I want to hear those. I'm gonna go back and listen to some of those, but. You got everything from pro wrestlers to porn stars to, mobsters.
Yeah, it's a big variety, man. Originally when I started this, I wasn't even planning on doing interviews. Like I was just going to tell stories. Like my very first episode that I did, me and a friend of mine that was kind of helping me out in the beginning to get it off the ground. We covered a true crime case out of Arkansas called The Boys on the Tracks, where these two kids, actually got run over by a train. But once they started digging into it, they weren't run over by accident. They were actually placed there by members of law enforcement that were into dealing drugs. And what happened was the kids had stumbled on a drug drop. And to eliminate them from being able to name anybody, they killed them and put them on the tracks and tried to cover it up. And this thing linked from like local law enforcement to the medical examiner all the way to Bill Clinton, who at the time was still the governor of Arkansas. And anybody that ever come out that had any info on it got killed, and under very, very, very suspicious circumstances. And so that's what originally I was going to do, was cover cases like that. And then we actually had an interview with Lilo Brancato Jr., who, if any of your fans have ever seen the movie Bronx Tale, he was the main character in that, Calogero. And then he was in Renaissance Man, Crimson Tide. He was in the second season of The Sopranos. So he had done a lot of stuff. And then he had a tale, you know, where the fame just kind of got to be a little bit too much. And he wound up getting hooked on drugs, and they broke into a house, and the guy he was with actually wound up shooting an undercover, or not undercover, but just an off-duty police officer. Mm-hmm. And so I want to say he done like eight years in prison. His buddy got life because he actually, Lilo didn't actually do the shooting. His buddy did. But it was just such an interesting story because most people don't know that part. They knew, oh yeah, I seen him in this, and then I haven't seen him in a while. They don't know why they haven't seen him in a while. And once I done that first interview, just the way he laid out the story, I was just like, I really like this. I really like getting the stories from people, and it just kind of snowballed from there.
Mm-hmm. What I want to know, you know, just right off the bat, because, you know, as somebody who tries to interview a new person every week, right? How do you get in contact with some of these people? Because they're not like nobodies, you know, and I don't use the word nobodies like, you know, in a disparaging way, because I love interviewing nobodies. I love, you know, interviewing somebody that's like the average Joe. Right. But how do you get in contact with these people that have, you know, some sort of, you know, either past or fame or, you know, some kind of notoriety?
In the beginning, I used Instagram, and a lot of them would respond, believe it or not. I mean, now don't get me wrong. You know, Lilo Brancato Jr. had, you know, some major movie roles. Obviously he went through what I went through, but, you know, I'm not going to expect somebody like Tom Hanks to respond on Instagram, or, you know, a Brad Pitt. So I go after the guys that I do believe will respond. And Lilo did. And then after that, man, it's really just word of mouth. If they come on your show and they enjoy the time, they appreciate the interview and the you know, the deep dive into their story, then they will say, hey, I got a guy, you know, that you might be interested in. And that's really how it started for me. Like once I done Lilo, and then I done a guy, I'd actually seen a TV show years ago. It used to come on called Masterminds. And it was basically where people would pull these capers, robberies, you know, smuggling deals, and they would almost get away with it. But one little small thing would get them caught. And there was a guy that moved 75 tons of pot on a shipping boat 2 times. He done it 2 different times. The first time was 25 tons. Then the feds actually caught on to him, and he still moved 50 more tons while the feds was watching him. And he wound up getting caught later on because somebody rolled on him. But I actually just searched his name, and it came up, and I sent him a message, and he told me, he was like, look, he said, I'll come on and do your podcast. He said, you just do me one favor. He said, go on and make a donation to any, you know, organization that's around you for the helping of a recovering addict, and I'll come on and do your show. And just doing things like that, and just one person tells you about somebody else, and it just kind of snowballs. And I went from, you know, worrying if I was going to have a guest once a month to now I probably got like 2 months worth of guests in the can. I don't even really have time to do shows on something that don't involve a guest anymore, really.
Right. That's really cool. You know, because my approach is I never wanted to do like a podcast where I don't have a guest. You know, I want to have somebody to kind of play off of. I didn't want to necessarily do the whole thing where it's just me, you know, talking to myself. You know, I find that very boring. You know, I listen to a lot of, and I notice you're a pro wrestling fan, you know, but I listen to that whole formula that Conrad Thompson has, where, you know, he's telling stories with the legends, right? And I love that, you know, like, because it's like you're in the room, like you're a fly in the wall, you know, and you're just listening to those old stories, and they're shooting the shit that, you know, they have their rapport, and they're very funny. That works for me.
Oh yeah.
Know?
No, I agree 100%. Like I said, when I first started this, I had a friend of mine that he agreed to help me do the shows where we didn't have a guest. And I knew he had a lot going on, and he was like, look, I'll help you. He's like, when it takes off, he's like, I'll just kind of bow out. He didn't want to be on the interview portion of it. Me and him have been friends for years. We grew up. We were both big wrestling fans. We were both into movies and the behind the scenes of the movies. So a lot of the episodes that we did, he knew a lot about. We didn't really have to have any prep work because we kind of already knew the subject matter. So, you know, we covered an episode that was really funny. You ever seen that documentary called Action Park?
Yes, the one where they're talking about that park that everybody got hurt at.
Yeah, everybody got hurt, man. I mean, just teeth knocked out, broken bones, people jumping on top of people dying, getting electrocuted. I mean, until people actually started dying, the documentary was very funny, just how it was telling about how everybody got hurt. And that was one of our funniest episodes that we did. I mean, we could barely get through it because we were just laughing so hard. We put some snippets of the documentary in there. But yeah, I mean, that's just, I get what you're saying. You have somebody to play off of. You can do so much more as opposed to somebody just talking by themselves.
Mm-hmm. That, and like you mentioned, the stories, like that. I think people really get caught up in that. Even if you're talking to somebody that nobody knows or you've never heard of, right? If you build it up right, and you just kind of how do I put it? You get that human factor in there, right? Yeah. People really kind of gravitate towards that, and I've seen that, even with, like I said, people that I just kind of grew up with. I'm like, come on the podcast, we'll have fun with it. It's nothing, it's not too serious, it's just two people talking.
Yeah, that it was about 3 weeks ago. We done an interview with a guy named Case Blaze, and this is a young kid. Well, I'd say he's probably like 20, maybe 28 now, but he looks really young. But he spent 15 years on the run from law enforcement. I mean, a lot of times when I interview these people, I say their stories should be made into movies, but this one is definitely something that should be made into movies. Like it started out by like an accident. He wound up getting a felony on his record. He didn't realize it. Then somehow or another, he got into stealing cars, and these weren't just cars from people. They were cars from dealerships. Then he got arrested for that. He escaped prison. They found him years later. They got him back in jail. He escaped a second time. At that point, he was on the run for like 15 years. He made his way into Canada. He went to school. He got a degree. He come back into the United States. He went to Florida. He was using the name of a cousin that he had that legally changed his name. So he picked up his old name, opened businesses. I mean, was just killing it. And the cousin got mad because he wasn't giving him any money for it, and ultimately turned him in. And he wound up going to jail, but the judge was just so impressed by everything that he'd accomplished. He didn't even send him back to prison. He was just like, we call this the Department of Corrections, for people to go in and correct themselves and correct their mistakes. And he said, very rarely can I say that somebody's done that on their own. And he said, I believe that you have. And like I said, he's not a movie star. He's not somebody that everybody knows, but I just felt like his story was so compelling that I just had to put it on there.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw that it popped out on your social media there. I was scrolling through. I'm like, here's some crazy stuff, man. And I know people are captivated by like crime stories,
Oh yeah.
I haven't really kind of fallen into that rabbit hole yet, but once people start listening to like true crime stuff, or they start watching like what do they call it? Like the murder porn stuff, it's like they get just so into it. It's like it's an addiction almost, right?
It is, man. It's a rabbit hole. And I'll be honest with you, probably 3 years ago, I didn't even listen to podcasts. I just happened to start listening to a particular podcast that somebody told me about. It was on the TV show. It was on Netflix called The Staircase. I don't know if you remember that, where the guy's wife fell down the stairs. He was a writer, and it was in North Carolina, which is close to where I'm at. So that's kind of what piqued my interest. And then it was put on Netflix, and then he went to jail for it. Then he wound up getting exonerated and let out of jail. So I was listening to a podcast on that, and then that just led me down the hole of true crime and other things. And I just got really into it. And then when COVID hit, it kind of put a damper on everything. And I was just like, this is something I think I might want to try to get into. And that was kind of the birth of this whole idea. But yeah, those crime stories, man, you can get sucked in real quick with stuff like that.
Yeah. But I kind of did the same thing, with the whole, COVID thing. I'm like, I need social interaction. I started the whole podcasting just because, I'm like, well, I listened to those wrestling ones. Those are fun, and I can tell a story. I'm like, why not? I don't even have to put it anywhere. No pressure. Just, record it and, see how it turns out. And of course, right away when I record, I'm like, okay, I want this in Spotify. I want this everywhere, it turned out pretty good. I have fun with it still. I mean, I personally am not looking to, do any kind of Joe Rogan stuff with it, but you know, as long as, to me, as long as it's still fun, people are still listening, you know, I'll keep going with it. You know, I think this is episode 104. So, I mean, we're doing okay. You know, it's I haven't lost interest.
Yeah, that's the important thing, man. It's got to be fun for you. I think when it gets to be more like a job, then you need to be getting compensated for it. And I can tell you, like, going into this, like, originally, like I said, I was just going to do the true crime. I was just going to do audio. Then when I done the video, the first interview, I was like, well, I want to record this just off general principle. And if it's not even, if I never do another interview, just as it's basically like a video version of an autograph, so to speak, you know? And so I recorded that. Then I went down putting them on YouTube. So all my video interviews are on YouTube. Now that can get into some time when you start getting into editing videos and stuff like that. So it can be time consuming, but at the same time, if you enjoy it, it doesn't seem more like an aggravation. You know, you have to take the pride in it and enjoy it. And you know, I think the work kind of speaks for itself after that. And you said you're on episode what on your channel?
So we're like 104. Yeah.
104. Yeah. I mean, so obviously, you know, you're plugging along. How do you typically drop yours? Like one a week, 2 a week, or
one a week?
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, you're plugging along, man. That's good. That's great.
Yeah. I mean, you know, once I hit like a year, I'm like, okay, I can do this for a bit. And then I hit 75 and 100. I'm like, all right, we're going to do this for a bit, I guess. You know, it doesn't get boring. You know, like I said, it's kind of something that I look forward to, because the way I do things is I'll even accept like somebody I've never heard of. I'll interview them tomorrow morning, you know, like kind of like I did, you know, with you, for example, you know, like I think we just got put together yesterday. Yeah. I'm like, okay, let's talk tomorrow morning. I should be, the way I look at it, I should be able to hold a conversation with anybody.
Right.
You know, and if I can't meet that challenge, then I shouldn't be doing this, you know?
Exactly. And I don't know about you, but in the beginning, like I was a little nervous, especially with my first interview, not being with, you know, just an average person. It was with a movie star who's been on countless movies, countless shows. He had been on Vlad. He had been on, I think, Patrick Bet David. He'd been on a bunch of shows. So I was a little nervous, and I put so much prep work into my questions, and it still come off okay. But after like my second interview, my third interview, the prep work started going away. It just started being organic conversations. And I mean, I might have a few things jotted down that I make sure I want to hit in the conversation. But as far as like, you know, a whole scripted deal, that went out the window after like episode 3 or 4. And it just became an organic conversation. As a listener or as an interviewer myself, it was so much better that way. And like you said, you know, you can take a look at somebody's social media or something real quick, an overview of their work, and you can be able to hold a 30, 45-minute conversation. No problem. Yeah, no, I'm glad you mentioned that. I did the same thing. I would prepare literally almost 4 pages of notes because I wanted to get everything in there. And it almost became something that I wanted to, you know, run through that was kind of scripted. The problem with that was I went off on so many tangents. I never followed it, you know? Yeah. And so, you know, I just kind of dropped it after. I mean, I went a little longer. I think I went like 10 episodes, 11 episodes where I started to just say like, this isn't working. Yeah. You know, and then the conversations I think did become better because there was less pressure to get those questions in. And if I didn't get it in, and it's like, all right, let's come back and do another episode, you know? Right. Yeah. And that's kind of the key to it, man. Just, you know, letting that organicness kind of evolve and take it. Like one of the episodes we did, I actually interviewed Tom Sizemore, who's an actor. He was in the movie Heat with Robert De Niro and Val Kilmer. He was in Natural Born Killers. He played Scagnetti, the cop, when Mickey and Mallory went to jail. He was in Saving Private Ryan. He's been in a ton of movies. I think altogether his movies has garnered over like $2 billion at the box office. Oh. So he's a pretty big name, well-named actor. And he's had his battles with, you know, drug addictions and things like that in the past. And we talked about a lot of stuff like that. But me and him talked about everything from the state of movies to where it's at with studios and how Marvel's just kind of taken over to the mafia. He portrayed John Gotti in a film, and we talked about that. He actually got to talk on the phone with John Gotti for a little bit about the role. when they were in Heat and they had that famous shootout scene, where they're just tearing up the streets in LA after that bank robbery. He said they were actually trained by like some professional Marines. And the clip where you see Val Kilmer's like shooting this way and then shooting the other way, then he does a clip change. He said he'd done that so on the money that they used that video in training exercises for new Marines. I mean, so just a lot of information that I never would have thought would even have come out in my questions. And I think our interview ran for like 3 hours, man. We talked about everything, and it was fantastic. I mean, he's a wealth of knowledge. We talked about a lot of the movies that he had shot, stuff that he was doing, now, past girlfriends. He dated Heidi Fleiss, who, if your listeners don't remember, maybe know that name. She was basically the Hollywood madam back in the day that supplied top-notch stars, politicians, and stuff like that. So he's got quite a story.
Yeah, I haven't heard of Heidi Fleiss in I don't know how many years, but you would think like, oh yeah, people know exactly who that is. People don't know who that is anymore. You don't have to remind them, but
yeah.
Oh man, how scandalous that was. That's crazy.
Yeah, that black book, man. But she kept it quiet though. That's one thing I'll give her. She had dirt on a lot of people, and she went to jail. She done her time, and I'm not sure how much time she wound up doing, but trust me, if she'd have wanted to get out of that, she had the means to do it. She kept a lot of people out of trouble. She kept her mouth shut. And I got a feeling when she got out, there was probably a briefcase or something waiting for her when she got out.
Mm-hmm. More than likely. And like I mentioned before, you're a wrestling fan, and that always piques my interest, man, because like we're kind of like a little bit of our own society in that sense, right? Where like when you see somebody else a wrestling fan, it's kind of like when two dogs kind of see each other, right?
Yeah.
I noticed I had a Barry Horowitz on the show. I thought that was so cool. It's like he just explained so much about the business that I didn't really know about. And then I noticed you had The Godfather, man, and I thought that was pretty cool. I had him do a cameo for a friend of mine, and I thought that was pretty cool. But I'm like, you had him do a whole episode, man.
Yeah, he was pretty cool, and we drank from that episode. If you watch it on the YouTube, we started out with a drink. He drank Gentleman Single Barrel Jack Daniels, and by the time that interview was over, man, I ain't gonna lie, I was feeling pretty good because we'd done about four or five drinks throughout it. But he was really cool. He told a lot of good, in-depth stories, behind the scenes stuff, like before he got into the business, because he was actually he played football, he played basketball, so he was a heck of an athlete, before. And then a lot of cool stories when he was in the business. And one of the coolest ones he told, and I don't know if you've heard this, but maybe somebody hasn't. He said it was later on in his career. It was definitely during the Attitude Era. He was in his Godfather gimmick. And he said him and his basically drug dealer would get to the show. He was usually like the first match. And he said that didn't bother him. He said he would come out, do his first match, and then he would be gone somewhere. And so he said they were coming down off the elevator, and he said they were smoking a joint in the elevator because Godfather's like a huge weed cannabis connoisseur. Like he's a big proponent of that. And he said they just had the whole elevator just like filled up, like you could barely even see the buttons. And he said the doors open and they step off, and it's Vince McMahon, Linda McMahon, Shane, Stephanie, and I think he said Jerry Briscoe. And he said it's like a Cheech and Chong movie. All the smoke's just pouring out of those doors. And he said Vince looks at him and says, "Charles, I think we'll get the next one." But I mean, that was just him, man. He said that gimmick that he had was as close to gimmick as real life as it could be. He was basically him. That was him. I know, they're really cool to interview, and they have a lot to say. When it comes to the podcast, though, like I don't make money on it, right? Yeah, and I don't pay guests, and I had a bunch of of pro wrestlers lined up, but then somebody else started interviewing the same kind of like circle of them, and started paying them like without even asking, right? So they just started offering like, "Hey, I'll pay you this much. I'll pay you this much. I'll pay you this much," and so they stopped like wanting to do anything for free, right? Have you ran into that or anything like that? I paid a couple guests in the beginning, and how I looked at that was I looked at it as an investment, because if you want people to come on your show, especially in the beginning, it's hard because nowadays, honestly, everybody kind of started a podcast. Really, I mean, it became a craze when the COVID started. So I can kind of get an artist or a former star's point of view where, especially when it comes to wrestlers and things like that, if everybody's reaching out to them, if you've done a podcast where everybody reached out to you, you wouldn't have any time in the day to live your life. Mm-hmm. So I get that to a point. But also you're going to go, or to me, if I was a wrestler or a movie star or whatever, if somebody wanted me on their show, I'm going to go look at their show, check them out, check out their guests, check out their platform, check out the way they do it, just how they present themselves, how they present the show, what all avenues it's on. And if it looks good, then I'll do it. And I think that's kind of where I'm at now. But in order to get there, I'll admit I paid a few guests in the beginning, but here lately, I don't pay anything. And it's I get people, one guy sent me an email and I don't even know how he got my email. I guess maybe off one of the websites, but it was about a book that was coming out about a guy that was, he was a reporter for the Vice Network. And basically his job on this particular story was to cover how they were smuggling cocaine from the US over to Australia. Well, while researching that, he actually started doing it and got busted and went to jail. So I interviewed the author of that book, and then he talked about a few of his other books. And one of his other books was a book called Storefront Sting, where this guy was basically an undercover ATF agent, and they busted bikers and mobsters and, got guns off the street. So he introduced me to the guy he wrote the book about. His name was Lou Velozzi, who was an ATF agent, and I got him on the show. So that's kind of how it started, where when it gets to that point, you don't really have to worry about doing anything for free because one guest has a good time and then the other person just recommends them to someone else. And like I said, I haven't paid for guests really for a while and don't plan to, either.
Yeah. And that whole thing is just with me, it's like, hey, I'm not doing anything to make money off of anybody.
Yeah.
Right. I don't even know how the whole, what do you call it? Monetizing thing works. I honestly don't care. I mean, I just, I don't think I'll ever want to pay anybody to do the podcast, and I hate to sound cheap about it. It's just, it's a hobby essentially for me. And
right.
I guess what I'm asking you is like, where do you see yourself going with the podcast? Is it something that you do for fun? Is it like a hobby? Is it more so something that you're taking more seriously, where you see it becoming, maybe a source of income or something that you do like more full time?
I mean, honestly, to be dead set honest, I started this for fun. I started this for fun. Didn't know if it was going to last because honestly, I think the track record for most podcasts is like 6-7 episodes. And then people realize that it is a little bit of work. It's not just sit down, hit record, and then shoot it out to all these places. There is a little bit of money involved depending on how you want to get your setup done with mics and equipment and stuff like that. Because at the end of the day, if you want to put out a professional show, those things do matter. Yes, people can record podcasts with cell phones. I've recorded many guests with cell phones. But eventually I would like to possibly make this a career. And I made some choices and some contacts where I kind of partnered up with some guys. And one of the mobsters that I interviewed, his name was Anthony Ruggiano, Jr. His dad was actually talked about in the movie Goodfellas. I don't know if you've seen the movie Goodfellas or not.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, when they're going around the restaurant, and he said this was Mo Black's brother, Fat Andy. Well, Fat Andy was a real guy, Fat Anthony Ruggiano. I interviewed his son, and he actually has it's a Facebook page, but also a charity organization. It's called Reform Gangsters, and basically what it is they help people that are recovering addicts and have drug issues and things like that. And they're planning a charitable event. And he asked me to come down and do my show, but interview the guests from there. And I've had some other people that kind of threw some offers like that to me. And so I'm like, well, if it can get to something like that, I would definitely want to pursue this to being more of a business to generate income. I mean, it started out as fun and I'm still having fun. If I never make $1 off this, I'm still going to be able to say, look, I interviewed this guy. And those things will be there forever. I mean, YouTube's not going anywhere. We know that. Spotify, I don't think is going anywhere for a long time either. So these things that I've done, they'll be out there a long time after I'm gone. And that's just part of, something that I feel like I'm leaving to the world to enjoy a long time after I'm gone. But if it leads to something where I can generate income, absolutely. I will definitely be into that.
Yeah, it will be there forever, except if they do the whole damn MySpace thing where they got rid of all the audio files.
Yeah.
All my hits are gone from 2004.
I had my MySpace, man. I remember that. I honestly like that better than Facebook. I hope they don't
I think it was
my stuff, but
I think it was the best social media platform there was.
Dude, because you could put the music on there, add your top 8 friends. I mean, I loved it. I was really upset when they took that. I didn't even want a Facebook like in the beginning. Everybody kept saying, you got to get one of these. And I was like, it's not glamorous to me. It's not what MySpace was. And then I guess you kind of just got forced into getting one because there was really nothing else there.
Well, it was very generic, and I think when it comes down to it, for some reason, people love generic, Yeah. I'm gonna commit a little bit of a sin here, and like for example, when it comes to food, right? People love the restaurant Raising Cane's. Mm-hmm. I think it's garbage, and that's to some people, again, that's a sin right there. That's that's blasphemy, right? Yeah. I don't know how you feel about that. If you've ever had it.
I have had it. I worked for a little bit of period of time. I worked for a sign company, and we would build and fabricate signs and then go install them, and also do work on existing signs. And we had to do a sign at Raising Cane's that was just really aggravating to try to fix. And we were there for like 3 days. So I ate there since we were already there. When it got lunchtime, we just lowered the truck down and, we'd go in there and have lunch or whatever. And it wasn't my favorite. I've had better chicken places for sure.
Mm-hmm. But see, that's, I don't know what it is, man. I just noticed with a lot of things, like with fashion, with food, with entertainment, people love generic things. Mm-hmm. So that's why sometimes you got to try to break the mold and make things, stand out. And because most things are generic. Like I said, like something like Raising Cane's, where it's bland and has no flavor, and unless you dip it in that sauce, but you can't be drinking that sauce all day. There's clothing brands out there that have like a little tiny logo, and it's like $200 a polo shirt.
Yeah. I can't see myself buying that, man. And I honestly, one thing that I did do is our logo, and I'm sure you've seen it if you look through, is like the blue flame with the crime entertainment. I actually got some shirts made, to start selling on the website to maybe generate some extra income too. So some merch sales. And that's about all I wear, man. I wear my own stuff. I've got a lot of sayings on there because I found out that you couldn't copyright a saying. Like there's no copyrights to a saying, even if it was in a movie or whatever. Now you can't put somebody's likeness up there, like a picture of them, but if it's a saying, you can't copyright that. And so those are some things that I added, and I started putting out shirts. Like it's something I always used to say was a saying called "The hustle never ends." And I put that on a t-shirt. There's a famous shirt that started going around, especially in a lot of these mob groups, where it was called "Stop Glorifying Rats." And that was just all that was on the t-shirt. And every time I would put that t-shirt on any picture or social media, I would have 30 people commenting like, man, I need that shirt. Where'd you get that shirt? Where'd you get that shirt? And instead of sending them somewhere else for them to make money, I was like, you know what? I'm going to start selling it. So and that's kind of what I did. And it just kind of went from there. But I wear my own stuff now. I don't hardly wear anybody else's. I'm like you. I'm not paying $80, $90 for a damn white t-shirt with a little teeny polo symbol on it or something like that, or whatever the case may be, that I'm probably going to spill something on within an hour after I go outside or brush up against something and get it dirty. I'm just not going to do that. So I've just become a big proponent of wearing my own stuff. Yeah,
for sure. Now, you said you're hoping to make this something, as far as like a career, you're hoping it'll take off. I mean, what's the steps you need to take to get there, man? I know you're having fun with it. You're like you say, you have your t-shirts and everything going on. But what's missing in that formula right now that you're working on to really, build your brand up?
Well, I'll be honest with you. To give you the 100% honest answer, I don't know. It's just to grind. Like, obviously in the YouTubes, there's steps you have to do to get monetized. And I'm by no means am I an expert. This is just what I found out. Like I said, before I started this, I had never posted anything to YouTube in my life, nor Spotify or anything. So I know like one of the criteria you have to meet is you have to have 1,000 subs, which I've got that. You have to have over 4,000 viewing hours. And then I think there's some other 2-step verifications, but that's nothing more than just like verifying your email. and things like that. So once that gets there, then you're able to monetize. Then you can make some money off the YouTube. But from what everybody tells me, YouTube is just so kind of hit and miss that if you put the wrong thing up there that they don't necessarily like, they can demonetize you quick
right away. Yeah.
So from what I understand, reaching out to sponsors for your show, for the audio side, you mentioned you listened to Bruce Pritchard and Conrad Thompson show, Something to Wrestle With. I remember in the beginning, we didn't have a lot of ads in those. And then as they got bigger, you had a good bit of ads in there. And that's where a lot of those guys generate their income. As to this point, I didn't put any ads in any of my shows. None of my shows have ads on the audio side of things. My plan was to do this for a year. On my 1 year anniversary, kind of sit down, sit back, take a look at what I'm at, take a look at the numbers. Cause I don't know what particular platform you use, but I use the Buzzsprout. And so they monitor all your downloads. They shoot it out automatically to all the major platforms. Is to just, when I hit that year mark, take a look, see where I'm at, and then kind of regroup and see where I wanted to go. Maybe at that point, reach out to sponsors. Cause one thing that I did learn is early on, you're not going to get a very good sponsor if you're just starting out because they don't really know what you're going to bring to the table. They want to see a body of work, so to speak. So that was kind of like my decision I made was, all right, I'm going to do this for a year. Start with, if I get to that year, then I'm taking it serious. It's, it is a passion. And then after that, if it gets to the point to where I'm looking to make, some financial gains from it, I can shoot somebody out an email, whether it be, Manscaped or Blue Chew or whoever, some of the more popular sponsors, and just say, look, I've been doing this for a whole year. These are my list of guests. I'd love for you guys to be a sponsor. And then that's a big way that people generate income through these types of ventures.
Yeah. I think that's it's a good plan, man. The sponsorships, I think I'm a sucker for those advertisements sometimes, I think that's how I ended up doing the Dollar Shave Club back in the day. Yeah.
Yep. The Dollar Shave Club. I done the Manscaped ones. I remember it was funny on Something to Wrestle With. And that's one reason too, because I said, if I ever started doing this, I could come up with funny ways to advertise. And I remember, I don't know what episode it was, but it was Something to Wrestle podcast. And Conrad was like, "Oh, ow, shit. Oh, those are the sounds I used to make when I had to shave my balls when I did not have the Manscaped for Lawnmower 3.0. And I would laugh sometimes at work, man, listening to those on my earbuds. And I was just like, man, I could do that. I could make some funny, things to try to sell stuff. So, and I actually messaged him on Instagram a few weeks ago. And when I had Jasmine St. Clair on the show, and she was into wrestling a little bit, she was in XPW and ECW. And I messaged him and I said, who booked this shit? And I said, me. And I said, I just want to thank you, man. I said, you might not realize it. I said, but your show with Bruce kind of inspired me to do my own podcast. And I said, it's been going great. I didn't really expect a response, to be honest, but I got one. And he's like, man, that's awesome. I'm glad you're enjoying. Nice. And I just thought that was cool. That was very cool of him.
Very humble. That's one thing about him, man. I thought, he has every right to be a dick. But he's a cool guy.
But I don't know how he does it, man. I do one show and, sometimes now I'm getting to the point where I have an interview about every day of the week because I do have a regular job. This isn't my only job. I'm a welder and a lot of times we work 10 hours a day. So when I come home, I really only feel like doing at the most one interview a day. I don't really feel like doing two because I want to put energy into it. And by the end of the day, I'm kind of running low on that. So I got enough energy to give into one good interview. But like last week, I had an interview every single day of the week. And it just, sometimes it can get a little grinding. And I think that's when you have to be careful of burning yourself out. And how he's doing it, man, I just don't know because he's got like 5 or 6 of them now?
It's like every day of the week.
Yeah. He's got one with JR. He's got one with Kurt Angle, Jeff Jarrett, Tony Schiavone, Bruce Pritchard.
That's a lot. Now, Arn Anderson was like pulling teeth, man.
Yeah. Arn Anderson, that's a lot, man. Yeah. A lot of shows to try to get done because there's a lot of work behind the scenes and stuff. And then he's got his ad-free shows thing that he's doing and StarCast. And I'm not sure how much hands-on he's still with his mortgage company, but that's a working fella.
I think he's got a team of people now, right? That really kind of, but even then, just like you said, having the interview, having to be on and, turn your personality on for, X amount of time and doing that every day. It's gotta be very daunting.
Yeah, it can be for sure. But at the same time, though, I think that goes back to what you and I were discussing earlier. If you're talking to people on a subject that you're passionate about and that you're interested in, I think that makes it easier. Mm-hmm. When you go into something that maybe you have no clue about what it is you're talking about, and if you don't have any interest in it, it can seem boring. And I think that will bleed through to the audience. And that's one thing when I started this show, I was like, well, I'm going to bring guests on that, interest me. And I know that, some of my interests are the same as other people's. So, I mean, like you said, when you look through, you're going to have something for everybody. If you don't like the mob stuff and the former mobsters, we've got actors. We've got actors that's acted in Sopranos, like 3 or 4 people off the Sopranos. Other big movies. We've got singers. We've got comedians. We've got porn stars. We've got drug smugglers. We've got drug kingpins. I mean, we've got it all over the map. And so there's going to be something there for everybody. I don't know if you're a horror movie fan. We interviewed Lisa Wilcox, who was the main star in the Nightmare on Elm Street's 4 and 5 series. So that was pretty cool. I'm a big horror movie fan from back in the day, as well as wrestling. So anybody I get on the long lines of guests like that, I mean, I just really enjoy it. It's just kind of like reliving parts of my childhood, so to speak.
For sure.
Some of those people.
If it's something you grew up watching, why not? That's a good. It's always going to be a good conversation. But
you have a deep seated passion that and a relationship to it when you see it.
You ever deal with like a conversation? You're just like, damn, this is a stinker, and I know it's going to be a bad one. I think sometimes, like I said, I take on anybody. I'll talk to anybody, but sometimes I just get some that are so bad where it's like, I'm trying to just pull teeth. Like, I'm trying, buddy. I'm trying to get you out of it. And I think
I haven't had one yet, man, to be honest. And I'll be 100% here. There was a guy that I interviewed, and I'm not going to name drop him. And I found out later maybe why it was the way it was. But I watched him. He was on a bigger program, and it's like the guy would ask him a question to where he could talk 10 easy minutes on it if he wanted to elaborate. Mm-hmm. And his reply to it was like, yeah, that's right. And then that was it. And so I'm watching these interviews to prep for the interview that I'm going to have. And I was like, oh man, this is going to be like really, really hard. This is one of these people that just don't want to give that, that extra amount of information. But then when we done it, it wasn't like that. And from what we talked after the show, I told him, I was like, look, I said, I watched this with this person and, it wasn't very good. He said, it was the delivery of it. He said he was trying to tell me what I did instead of asking me. He said, when you were asking me questions, he said, you were asking, wanting to know what happened. You weren't telling me, hey, this happened, this happened, this happened. What do you have to say about it? He said, how are you going to tell me what happened in my life when I don't have any clue who you are?
Right.
And at that point, it kind of clicked and made sense. So to answer your question, no, I haven't had that one that's going to be a stinker. And I have had episodes to where I thought probably not my best work as an interview, but it turned out to be one of my highest rated videos. So you never can tell really with some of these things, man. He was on one of a very famous TV show. He wasn't like a main player in it. And he's beat out a lot of the other people that were some of the main players that I've done interviews with. So you really never can tell what's going to click with the audience, what's going to get shared, what's going to get, moved around. Probably one of our most shared interviews. You're out there in LA, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you ever hear of that haunted house that was out there called McCamey Manor? I think that was in San Diego.
Okay. No, I haven't. I haven't.
Okay. So there was a house in San Diego called McCamey Manor. It was a haunted house. And the guy that done its name was Russ McCamey. And basically they can they have carte blanche to do whatever they want. They can torture you, put bugs on you, put you in holes, put snakes on you, scorpions, whatever. It's like pretty much like a Saw movie in essence. But people volunteer to do this. And he doesn't charge, and you have to go through like a lot of steps to be able to get to do it. But a lot of people don't like him. They say he gets off on torturing people and all that. But at the same token, you have people that love him because it's a passion project for him. He doesn't make any money off of it. He just does it because he likes horror movies. And, he got into it. He was in the Navy and he would decorate the ship while they were out at sea into like a horror film. I had him on the show to kind of explain his story. And man, that thing, when I started putting out clips of it, where he was saying that in the 50-page document that you have to sign to do it, where you possibly would get to a point where you would have to take out a fingernail or pull out one of your teeth to get to the next step. And it got shared, I want to say like 19,000 hits in like 24 hours. When I looked at that, I thought it was a mistake. Like I posted at nighttime, I went to bed, I woke up the next morning, I was like, holy Christ. And it's one of my highest, I think it is my highest video of all time.
Nice.
Yeah. So, I mean, somebody like that beat out, you know, like I said, movie stars and all these people we've mentioned, that story beat out them all. So you really never know what's going to hit that mark for your audience. Well,
the only thing I know is I'm not going to be interviewing any life coaches anytime soon because they don't even know what they do. You know,
yeah. So. No, I'm not going to be doing that either.
but that's just me. That's just me.
Made mistakes, man. I want people that's made mistakes and learn from them and can help other people, you know, either avoid making them or once they make them, let them know that you can turn things around. At the end of the day, even though we deal with, you know, interview people that's had, you know, pretty rough past, all of it circles back to you can change and you can do better and you can right the ship.
Yeah, for sure. Now that's pretty good good description of your show there, right? Where can people find you? Where on social media?
Man, we're on every platform. We're on YouTube at Crime and the and symbol Entertainment, Crime and Entertainment. We're on TikTok at Crime and Entertainment. We're on the Facebook also, Crime and Entertainment, and then Instagram is Crime and the letter N Entertainment. Somebody had that page with the and sign, and I guess never done anything with it, so we couldn't get that handle to keep it all the same. But we're on all the major platforms as well. We're on Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, all that good stuff. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, the Stitcher app is one I tell a lot of people about because that's free. And then you can get it on Android or Apple, either one. So you don't have to have a subscription for it either. And that's something that you might could look into later on. They do have a Stitcher Premium that you can put your show on. So anybody that pays for that premium, you know, you get a piece of it. So that's something I might look into later as well. But Stitcher's a great app because you don't need a subscription and you can go back and listen to all the back episodes. So no matter what platform you're on, if you get the Stitcher app, it's strictly for podcasts. You can go and search us on there or anybody's show and go back from episode 1 and catch all the way up. So that's something that helps out a lot of people that don't necessarily have an Apple phone or don't have a Spotify account. They can use that too.
Nice. All right. Well, Wade, anything else you want to throw out there to my podcast world from yours?
Man, I just keep doing what you're doing, man. Keep plugging along. I love people that started this thing and it's become a passion for them. And it's plain to see it's a passion for you. You've got the knack for interviewing. Not everybody has that knack. You know, some people enjoy watching these because, you know, when it would get into the do or die time, they might freeze up or not be able to do it. And, you know, you're very good at what you do. And, you know, keep plugging along, man. Keep grinding.
All right. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Definitely appreciate having you on.
Yes, sir. Anytime.
For everybody listening at home, I appreciate it. Thank you. Fuck you and good night. Podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. Like, follow, and share on Facebook and Instagram at Ignorance is Strength Podcast and on Twitter at The Ignorance Pod.